our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi has chaired here in Algiers the opening of the proceedings of the National Forum of Civil Society organized by the National Observatory for Civil Society under the patronage of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for the funneling of more aid to Gaza. And the UN Security Council has expressed concern over the intensification of violence in Sudan, torn by the civil war since last April, which has claimed nearly 12,000 dead, according to NGO estimates. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi has chaired here in Algiers the opening of the proceedings of the National Forum of Civil Society, organized by the National Observatory of Civil Society under the patronage of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. Placed under the slogan Dialogue, Citizenship and Development, this forum will be an opportunity to discuss several themes, notably free dialogue as a tool for active citizenship and participation in local development, the role of civil society in digital transformation for the achievement of local development, and the social solidarity or economy and corporate social responsibility in supporting civil society associations. The opening ceremony of this forum took place in the presence of advisors to the Presidency of the Republic, members of government, and officials of several national institutions and organizations. The President of the Republic urged on the occasion, in a message read on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi, the civil society to participate more in the efforts aimed at making civil society an effective and efficient force of proposal, while adhering to the participatory option and the commitment to work side by side with public authorities in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution. He stressed that civil society representatives also push all national organizations to contribute effectively to the activities of these organizations and convey the proposals and concerns of the different segments they represent to enrich public debate and dialogue, make up public policies, support efforts to implement them, and improve the capacity of public authorities to evaluate and assess them as necessary. On the same occasion, the President of the Republic called on the government to redouble or to deploy more efforts to improve the status and contribution of civil society, whether at the local or national level, as part of permanent support and response. He highlighted that the continuous and intensive activities of the National Observatory of Civil Society and the various events and seminars organized in the different provinces of the country, which preceded the holding of this forum, truly represent the implementation of our strategic vision aimed at for the first time in Algeria, or the history of Algeria, to establish civil society as an active partner capable of assuming responsibilities as a participant in the revival project, in which we committed ourselves to strengthen the institutional fabric to evaluate public activity at the service of citizens. The President of the Republic also highlighted the high status of civil society and its vital role in contributing to disseminating and strengthening the values of citizenship and promoting voluntary work for the public good in all fields of to achieve national and development goals. President Tebboune expressed his satisfaction with the notable and qualitative movement experienced by civil society in our country in a context marked by the 2020 constitutional reform. He reiterated that the new Algeria, which has made civil society and youth a main pillar of its edification, will constantly advance towards the improvement of public life and will adopt a participatory approach at the central and local levels to deal with the citizens' concerns and satisfy their aspirations. The head of state also highlighted the special attention that the state has granted to promoting and valuing the role of civil society so that it can become a platform for public discussion on various challenges, and also as an important player in the development process through its role of solidarity, awareness, and supervision. President Tebboune said civil society is the first ally in achieving the integrity of the state and supporting the government in a way that enhances national efforts aimed at achieving comprehensive, sustainable development in all its dimensions. To my colleague Mariam now for more news.
The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for the funneling of more aid to Gaza. The resolution, adopted following tense negotiation, called on all the parties to urgently take measures to allow for an immediate, safe and unconditional funneling of aid and to create the conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostilities. The adoption of the resolution, which has been postponed 3 times, was hailed by the UN Security General Antonio Guterres, who stressed that a humanitarian ceasefire was the only means of putting an end to the nightmare in Gaza.
The real problem is that the way Israel is conducting this offensive is creating massive obstacles to the distribution of humanitarian aid inside Gaza. An effective aid operation in Gaza requires security, staff who can work in safety, logistical capacity, and the resumption of commercial activity. These 4 elements do not exist.
The UN chief affirmed that only the enforcement of a ceasefire will start meeting the desperate needs of the population in Gaza, while recalling that 136 UN workers have been killed in 75 days. The adoption of the resolution was also hailed by the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, as a step forward and pointed out the necessity to put more pressure to secure a ceasefire.
We, the Arab Group and the OIC, declared that we are working for 3 humanitarian objectives. 1, to stop this war against our people in the Gaza Strip, which means ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire now. And then 2 is to have humanitarian assistance up to scale. And in fact, operative paragraph 4, which our brothers in Egypt were pushing so hard for it, we trust that the UN to be responsible for the verification of thousands of truckloads in order to enter the Gaza Strip at scale that asked for by the SG, so that it caters to the needs of the Palestinian people in all parts of the Gaza Strip. And the 3rd part is related to stopping the forced transfer outside of the Gaza Strip to Egypt. And that's also another very clear concern of Egypt and all of us, because we don't want to have a second Nakba and Egypt to be, at the receiving end of more than 2 million Palestine refugees.
He referred to the obstacles hampering the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Now we have 2 resolutions adopted. They are not as ambitious as the ones in the General Assembly, simply because there are those who have a veto power and they can do with it whatever they want. And often it is being abused. And in addition to these 2 resolutions, there are a group of resolutions that did not succeed because of the veto or the lack of having 9 votes. This is where we are. We are continuing the march. We will not relent until we reach an immediate ceasefire and having the massive amount of humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and to stop the crime against humanity of the forced mass transfer outside Gaza. We are getting closer, but we are not there. We will continue going back to the General Assembly, to the Security Council, to the Secretary General, to establish the mechanism, to keep demanding that this war has to stop, because this is an awful war, criminal war against the Palestinian people.
The Palestinian Foreign Minister pointed out that the UN Security Council's decision to provide aid to Gaza did not meet the challenges and aspirations for an end to the war crimes daily carried out by Israel against the Palestinians in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli army pursued its airstrikes for the 78th consecutive day against Gaza, claiming more lives. Palestinian sources said several areas were today hit by the Israeli heavy weaponry, including the towns of Gaza and Jabalia in the northern part of the country, as well as Khan Yunis in the southern part. UNICEF has warned that children under the age of 5 are confronted to a high risk of malnutrition and death in the Gaza Strip, as the risk of famine continues to rise in the enclave confronted to Israeli aggression for 78 days. UNICEF declared that in the forthcoming weeks, at least 10,000 children aged of 5 would suffer the deadliest form of malnutrition known and will need more therapeutic food. Back to you, Mohammed.
And the organization Reporters Without Borders has sued before International Criminal Court ICC the Israeli occupation forces for war crimes for the deliberate killing of Palestinian journalists in Gaza. It called on the prosecutor to launch an inquiry on the killings of at least 66 journalists since the Israeli army launched its operation on Gaza. The UN Security Council has expressed concern over the intensification of violence in Sudan, torn by a civil war since last April, which has claimed nearly 12,000 dead, according to NGO estimates. The Council strongly condemned in a press release the attacks against civilians and the extension of the conflict to areas hosting large populations of displaced people, refugees and asylum seekers, while deploring the spread of violence and the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in Sudan. And the Spanish far-left party Podemos has reaffirmed the historic responsibility of Spain in the process of decolonization of Western Sahara, calling on the Spanish government to reconsider its position. The deputy spokesperson of the Podemos party, Maria Teresa Perez, stressed that Spain has a historic commitment to complete the process of decolonization of Western Sahara and cannot turn its back to the Sahrawis. With this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, starting with a program devoted to the major events that took place actually in 2023 with special focus on Turkey today. It will be followed by another program by my colleague Asia Bakar devoted to the situation in the Palestinian occupied territories. As for me and my colleague Miriam, will be back tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
2023 is drawing to its end, with the world witnessing global developments at many levels, notably the security, political and economic level, as well as natural and climate change levels. In Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan won the country's presidential election, defeating opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu in a runoff vote, thus thrusting his rule into a third decade. With 99.43% of the votes counted, preliminary official results announced by Turkey's Supreme Election Council (YSK) showed Erdogan winning with 52.14% of the votes. Kılıçdaroğlu received 47.86%. Speaking to thousands of his supporters outside the presidential complex in Ankara, Erdogan said that now was the time to put aside all the debates and conflicts regarding the election period and unite around the country's national goals and dreams. Erdogan said among the government's main priorities would be fighting inflation and healing the wounds from a catastrophic earthquake on February 6th, which claimed more than 50,000 lives in Turkey and neighboring Syria. Foreign leaders, including those of Russia, Qatar, Libya, Algeria, Hungary, Iran and the Palestinian Authority, were among the first to congratulate Erdogan. 2023 was also a special year for Turkey and its people. A devastating earthquake of 7.8 on the Richter scale hit southern Turkey in the early hours of February 6 this year, with epicenter in the Pardacik district of Kahramanmaraş province. The earthquake heavily affected the neighboring provinces of Adıyaman, Kalis, Osmaniye, Gaziantep, among others, where around 13.5 million people live, including around 2 million Syrian refugees. Many aftershocks followed the earthquake, and the second major earthquake hit the region after 9 hours with 7.5 magnitude, causing serious further damage and destruction of damaged buildings. According to figures, more than 5,000 people lost their lives, 108,368 people were injured. Damage surveys indicate that 173,000 buildings in 11 provinces collapsed or heavily damaged. Due to the risk of further damage as a result of aftershocks, people were restrained from entering their houses. President Tayyip Erdogan declared a 3-month state of emergency covering Turkey's 10 southern provinces hit by devastating earthquakes, and calling it a disaster zone in movement to bolster rescue efforts. Erdogan also said that 70 countries had offered help in search and rescue operation, and that Turkey planned to open up hotels in the tourism hub of Antalya to the west to temporarily house people impacted by the quakes.
Western media has majorly depicted the ongoing aggression on Gaza in the form of a shocking attack on the Israeli occupation. The coverage was largely in line with Western foreign policy trends regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which do not describe the occupation for what it is, while removing the character of resistance or national liberation from the Palestinian resistance movement. Many of these coverages were sugar-coated with an explicit emotional tone when it came to the Israelis, as was evident in written and spoken expressions in a clear propaganda that serves the Israeli agenda. This comes while the Hamas media office denounced the Western media coverage that does not show the reality of the atrocities committed by the Israeli occupation against the Palestinians, stressing that the media office of Hamas is working on showing the reality of the massacre committed against Palestinians in Gaza as it is.
Actually, we are calling all medias in West countries, in Arab countries, in African countries, in Asia countries. We are talking with them. We are explaining our stand, and we are making contacts with many countries in diplomacy field to explain what we are facing in Gaza Strip. We are facing great actions and great aggression on our people.
Flagrant bias of the Western media in line with their government's position did not prevent streets to be flooded by protesters waving Palestinian flags and calling for the end of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered in the U.S. Capitol this week, marching past the White House to hear chants of a free Palestine as the death toll continued to climb in the genocide committed against Palestinians in Gaza. Across the country, Americans have held pro-Palestinian protests with crowds gathering in Los Angeles, New York and Michigan, home to one of the largest populations of Arabs and Arab diaspora in the United States. In the United Kingdom, rallies took place in Manchester in northern England, Edinburgh and Glasgow in Scotland, and London amid police warnings against anyone showing support for the Palestinian resistance. Demonstrations in support of Palestine also took place in Switzerland's capital, Geneva, in northwestern Italy, and in the Irish capital, Dublin. Meanwhile, thousands marched in solidarity with the Palestinian people in France, defying the government's flagrant ban of pro-Palestine demonstrations. In fact, several politicians around the world resigned due to their government's position by the side of the Israeli occupation, denying the rights of the Palestinians to peace, security, and fundamental rights. Among these officials was Liam Jones, a British former Labour MP living in Wales, who resigned this week from the UK Labour Party because of Keir Starmer's support for the Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. In her letter of resignation from the party, Ms. Jones said, "The last straw has been Starmer's explicit support for the Israeli collective punishment of the population of Gaza, despite this being a war crime, a fact of which he should have been fully aware of." She went on saying, "When I joined the Labour Party in 1974, we opposed apartheid in South Africa. Now it is not allowed even to mention that the Israeli occupation is an apartheid state, a view endorsed by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as those with experience of apartheid in South Africa." Meanwhile, Cliff Haswell, a former chair of Cardiff North Constituency Labour Party, has also resigned. In his letter of resignation, he said, "Sadly, the response to the recent escalation of violence in the Middle East has exposed the Labour Party's complete abandonment of its moral authority and any sense of duty to defend the most oppressed. protest. He said, as the party leader gives unequivocal support to the Israeli occupation in its clear mission to eradicate Palestine, he has committed the entire Labour Party to this evil cause, not in my name, he said. He went on saying, in a stunning disregard for international law, the Israeli occupation is to be uncritically supported in continuing with apartheid, blockades, expropriation of land, and now a crime against humanity through the starving and bombing of 1 million children into oblivion. Irish MP Richard Boyd condemned the silence and reservation of his government when it comes to Israeli crimes against Gaza, stressing that bombarding Gaza and cutting water and food from the population is a flagrant war crime that cannot be sugar-coated with words like unacceptable.
Taoiseach, you said it is not okay for Israel to attack civilians, attack civilian infrastructure, to threaten to starve the people of Gaza. It most certainly isn't okay. It's a war crime. The Israeli government have brazenly, publicly and openly declared their intention to commit a war crime and have commenced that war crime against the people of Gaza, saying that they intend to starve of food, electricity, water, 2.2 million people. That is a war crime under the 4th Geneva Convention. They are raining down thousands of the most sophisticated missiles known to humanity onto the most densely populated area in the world, carrying the certainty that almost every missile will incur civilian casualties, will and are destroying the infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the energy, making Gaza uninhabitable.
The ongoing aggression on Gaza is not the first aggression that witnesses Western MPs as standing in the face of their biased governments to claim the right of Palestinians to a state, peace, security and humanitarian assistance. Another British MP, Andy MacDonald, criticised last March his country for trading with the Israeli occupation despite the latter's theft of Palestinian resources to carry out commercial deals with other countries and crimes against Palestinians in the West Bank.
In the West Bank town of Hawara, over 400 settlers, backed by Israeli soldiers, torched Palestinian homes, businesses and vehicles and killed 37-year-old Sama Aktesh in what senior IDF commanders have called a pogrom. Israel's Finance Minister Smotrich, who describes himself as a fascist homophobe, openly said Hawara should be wiped out. Mr. Speaker, such extremism has given licence by a lack of international accountability. So will the Minister, if he agrees with the rule of international law, commit to banning all goods sourced from Israeli settlements illegally built on occupied Palestinian land?
During the week, Palestinian UN Representative Riyad Mansour said at the Security Council that Palestinians are not subhumans and the airstrikes are nothing but a flagrant war crime taking place in defiance of international law. He deplored the fact that Western media and governments start reacting and condemning only when Israelis feel a small proportion of what Palestinians have been taking for long decades.
Regrettably, history for some media and politicians start when Israelis are killed. Our people have endured one deadly year after another. We came to the Security Council month after month, warning of the consequences of Israeli impunity and international inaction. Last October, about a year ago, we stated before the Security Council the Palestinian people will be free one day or another, one way or another. We chose the peaceful way, the one the international community advocates for. Do not let Israel prove us wrong for our sake and theirs. This is not a time to let Israel double down on its terrible choices. This is a time to tell Israel it needs to change course, that there is a path to peace. where neither Palestinians nor Israelis are killed. And it is the one diametrically opposed to the one Israel is embarked on.
He also disclaimed Israeli allegations and justification for the blockade on Gaza and on the ongoing assault, stressing that when Israel's supporters say that it is defending itself, they are in fact giving the Israeli occupation a green light to kill and add to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza.
Israel keeps saying the blockade and repeated assaults on Gaza are to destroy Hamas, military capabilities, and ensure security. Clearly and expectedly, its blockade and assaults accomplished neither. The only thing they did accomplish was inflicting terrible suffering on an entire civilian population. It is time for an immediate end to the violence and the bloodshed, and it is time to end this blockade and to open a political horizon. When Israel now tries to justify yet another assault by the same faulty premise, no one should say or do anything to encourage it down this path. We know only too well that the messages about Israel's right to defend itself will be interpreted by Israel as license to kill, to pursue on the very path that led us here. 370, and the number is rising by the moment, of Palestinians that have been killed already in one day, including children, some barely a few months old. Entire families were killed in their sleep. Will this bring security? Will this advance peace? Where is the international protection the Palestinian people is entitled to when the occupying power violates international law and harms those it is obliged to protect? Aren't Palestinians' lives worth saving? The Palestinian civilians killed, the Palestinian children killed in occupied Palestine could have been spared. Isn't that a moral and legal obligation and a contribution to peace? Why nothing is done when those killed are Palestinians? We need to think hard of what logic we want to see prevail here. If this is about vengeance, then many Palestinians will feel they have much to avenge. If this is about peace, then the way to it is not through further entrenching oppression and occupation, but by ending it.
Riyad Mansour deplored the double standard policy of some world powers who find unlawful and baseless justifications for Israelis when it comes to killing Palestinians.
You cannot say nothing justifies killing Israelis and then provide justification for killing Palestinians. We are not subhumans. Let me repeat, we are not subhumans. We will never accept a rhetoric that denigrates our humanity and reneges our rights. A rhetoric that ignores the occupation of our land and oppression of our people. There is no right to security that trumps the right of a nation to self-determination. The fulfillment of our right to self-determination is the only path towards shared peace and security. We chose the peaceful path to achieve our rights, but Israel continued using blunt force against Palestinian lives and Palestinian rights. Israel cannot wage a full-scale war on a nation, its people, its land, its holy sites, and expect peace in exchange. One needs to address the root causes of the conflict, and by doing so, we will be addressing its consequences.
the ongoing aggression against Gaza and also the killing of Palestinians in the West Bank has proven once again the criminality of the Israeli occupation and its aims of committing genocide in a blatant attack and strikes against the people in Gaza. However, it has shown to the international community its brutality, illegality and rejection of any kind of peace process.